Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I'm thrilled to welcome an award-winning author with 15 books published. She teaches writing, she gives talks around the country. She was nice enough to be one of the authors who wrote a story for the Jewish anthology I co-edited, Coming of Age, 13 B'nai Mitzvah Stories. And most importantly, she's someone who I've gotten to be friendly with, as well as her being a fellow Brooklynite. Please help me welcome Nora Raleigh Baskin. Nora, thanks so much for joining me today.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Well, to start with, and you and I talked about it a little bit, it's amazing to me that I've spoken to you so many times over the last few years, but this is the first time that it's face-to-face, at least electronically. But it's nice to get to talk with you this way. I've been a big admirer of yours for you and your work, like I said. We've spoken several times, but researching you for this interview, there was so much I learned about you, which I didn't know. I mean, you were just a toddler when I was looking on your site, when you're a couple of events that changed your life forever. So I don't see how it couldn't, but how much of those events, I guess, seeped into your writing through the years?
Well, I don't know if I used to feel guilty or like I wasn't quite a real writer, because everything from my life has seeped into my work. I'd say my first 2, 3, 4 novels are so autobiographical or semi-autobiographical or biographical fiction, whatever they're calling it today. And I'd say that almost everything I write touches on the concept of a girl growing up without her mom in one way or another, whether her mom's in prison or her mom's died or her mom's neglectful or run away. That theme, constant.
Those who don't, you lost your mom at a very early age. You were 3 years old around then?
Yeah, 3.5.
And so, I don't know, like on that note, I mean, all these stories, like you say, are personal. So as many writers do, you're able to, put them into your stories, but are you able to compartmentalize, I guess, things when you write, being able to put it in a different box, mentally detach yourself for the sake of the story, or is it always lingering over you?
I used to, I mean, when I was younger, they consumed my whole life, not in a real healthy way. When I could channel those things into my writing, I'd say slowly over time, or maybe just getting older, they're compartmentalized and I can just pull them out when I need to. But truthfully, I'm really getting sick of writing about my life and myself. In our our B'nai Mitzvah book, that was totally fiction.
Right.
And so it feels good to do that.
Yeah. But for the early books, you definitely had much more of yourself in there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, every character is yourself, right?
Sure.
Every character. Okay, so I would say all my characters are emotionally true to me, but not literally true. Although in the beginning of my writing, they were really
very
me.
much.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely. I mean, if for people, if they want to go read your site, you lay it all bare there.
Yeah, it would be obvious. Like if you read my books and then read the site, you would know that they're pretty much. In fact, if you put all the stories together, you'd probably get a real picture of my whole life. Like you pick and choose a little bit here, a little bit there, because it was all too much for one story.
I'm just curious. I mean, which part of Brooklyn did you grow up in?
I'm sorry, what?
Which part of Brooklyn did you grow up in?
Oh, well, it's going to sound so like snotty, hoity-toity, snobby, whatever the word is, because now Cobble Hill is so elite.
Right.
But at the time, so early 1960s, it wasn't. So, and my dad was a professor at Pratt. So we lived like on Clinton Avenue, then we lived on Warren Street, we lived on Remsen Street. So it's Cobble Hill, but it wasn't Cobble Hill then.
And when did you move from there?
second grade.
Second
So
grade?
look, okay, I claim I'm from Brooklyn because I want to, because it's cool. But mostly I grew up in the Hudson Valley region of New York, Ulster County.
Yeah, I've moved like you. I moved around a lot as a kid. I've never lost the Brooklyn accent. No matter how many places I've gone to, it's there.
You're
Everyone,
proud of it.
I don't know if I'm proud of it, but it just won't go. No matter what I've tried. I've lived in different countries, different states, and the Brooklyn always stays. So like I said, so I did move around a lot. So you did as well, from what I was reading. So how did that affect you as a child? Was it tough to always have to make new friends, always feeling like you're starting anew?
Well, that's a good question. It absolutely, so many things. I mean, well, it affected my education.
Sure.
It affected, like, in one grade, we'd be learning the times tables, and then another, we were learning script, and somehow I missed some letters. I mean, there are seriously some letters I didn't learn how to write in script, because in those days you learn script.
Right.
But it also taught me to find one single person everywhere I go, everywhere, a conference, a party. Certainly when I moved to a new town, a new school, I would find one person that looked nice and looked like they knew what they were doing, knew the lay of the land.
Right.
So I would find one person to sort of navigate my new space. And I think it was a great skill. And you need one best friend,
Sure.
right? That initial in, and I still do it everywhere I go. And I kind of have a radar for,
Where you
like,
can
who's a
sign
nice
up.
person.
Right. Were you shy?
No,
You were not. Okay.
no, obviously no. I would, like, target someone. And even in college, my first year of college, my first week, I had a girl, I heard her read her essay out loud in class, and I said, her. That's the girl I'm going to be friends with. And I followed her to the cafeteria, and I stopped her at the top of the stairs. I'm 18, and I said, will you be my friend? I mean, it was
Wow.
that, it was that, like, well, because, when you move around, and
Yes.
also not having a mom and not
Right.
having anyone to sort of, protect me, you have to do it for yourself.
There, the problem was, as a kid, I didn't break out to my shelter much later. So as a kid, I was very shy. So it always took a long time to try to acclimate myself. And we definitely moved all over, as you said you did.
I was not shy.
Well, that's good.
In fact, you're reminding me, I once was made to stand out in the hall. Do you remember being like, you're talking too much, or you're getting in? I mean, I was never a bad kid,
Right.
but in class I was gregarious. And I remember getting sent out into the hall. Like, that was
Really?
punishment. I don't know if they do that anymore, but go stand in the hall.
I
And
do remember that.
go
Not
stand
didn't
in the
happen to
hall.
me. Yeah, it didn't happen to me. I didn't talk that much in class, but I think I was only kicked out of class once in my all through school. So and it was the teacher's fault. I will stick by that. But when did you first start showing an interest in writing, or discovering that you had a talent for it?
Oh, yeah, that's a really specific moment.
Mhm.
Was, and it sort of comes from everything we're talking about, but just, like, to condense it,
Yeah.
I moved to New Paltz again after having lived there. It's a crazy story, but my mom, then I had a mom and a dad, then I just had a dad, then I had a dad and a stepmother, then I had a stepmother and a stepfather. And each, it was a different
I don't know if you
school.
want to talk about it, because I saw that on your site. So you went and lived with your stepmom for a while without your dad.
Yeah, I know
For a
people
time.
don't really understand it. I don't really understand it. In the adults in my life were not real good
Mhm.
caretakers. But when I was going into sixth grade, I mean, I don't know, I don't, the trauma of my life is like, I have compartmentalized it, I guess.
Mhm.
I don't feel this. It doesn't identify me anymore.
Right. Right.
It used to be, I met someone and I couldn't even be friends with them. They wouldn't know who I am unless I told them my mom had committed suicide. It was like,
Right.
that's me, and it's no longer me. But memories are memories. And sixth grade, so I had just been told that my stepmother and her daughter, who was my sister, were gone, came home from camp, and they were gone. And I was now sent back to live with my dad, who, and this relates to your question. It answers your question. And my dad, who I hadn't lived with, and I kind of wasn't real attached to anymore, had to take me and my brother back. Take me, not I, right? Take me and my brother back. And so I started sixth grade, and by that time I was really acting out. Like I was getting in a lot of trouble. This is for adults, right? This
Yes,
YouTube is for adults.
yes.
So I was shoplifting. I was smoking cigarettes. I was hanging out with hanging out with a tough crowd in New Paltz in sixth grade. I don't know how tough that's going to be. I got suspended from school in sixth grade. It's another part of my writing is realizing that when you're young and you have so many questions and nobody's listening, you don't even know how to ask these questions. You have a need to get them out somehow. And at that time, before I discovered writing, I acted out. I got a lot of trouble, got suspended from sixth grade. And shortly after coming back to school, it was really humiliating to be suspended and come back into the classroom, and everybody knows what happened to you. And shortly after that, my teacher, Mr. Thompson, my English teacher, my language arts teacher, I mean, I really remember this. I remember this so clearly. And I've been telling this story for so long that it must be true. It's not like a distant memory. He decided to read. He said, before I pass back the homework to everybody, I'm going to read out loud. I'm going to, I remember him saying the best one in the class, or one of the example of good writing. It had been to write a fictional story. And I was sitting there, and I'm telling you, I was such a miserable little girl. I missed my stepmom, who I pretty much was my mom, my sister. I had already, so many bad things had happened to me. And he started reading this story, and it was like one word and then a sentence and then two sentences. And I actually just gave myself goosebumps. And then I realized it was mine.
Wow.
And I just flat out 100%, that was the moment I decided to be, I could be a writer. I was like, a crossroad, right?
Right.
Like a crossroad. I could go this way, and I was failing school. I was doing really poorly. I think I failed home ec, even if that's possible. Or I could go this way, that Mr. Thompson was pointing me, and write. And I just started writing, and my grades improved. By the end of sixth grade, I actually have my report cards. You can see my grades improve. And I found my diary, and from sixth grade, and I noticed that one, I wanted to be a writer. I didn't remember that I actually wrote this down. I wrote in my diary. It's July 1974. I have it memorized. And I started giving my work, whatever I was writing, to Mr. Thompson. And I realized too, a writer needs like one person to listen, right? They need one reader. That's it. At first, I think every writer, you just need one person who reads your work and hears it and gets it. And for the longest time, it was Mr. Thompson. So, I feel like he saved my life.
I believe very much in signs and it sounds like, I mean, you got it. And someone sent you the sign to change your life. Then,
Yes,
you know.
Yeah.
Now, were you a big reader? I mean, and too, or
yes.
yeah. Who were some of your favorite
Oh,
authors growing
yeah.
up?
Who's my favorite writer?
Who were your favorite authors growing up? Or do you have favorite books?
I mean, there was no cable TV. Well, when we were hippies and I was living with my stepmother and stepfather, we didn't even have a TV. And then when I went back to my dad, but there was no cable and it was just whatever you could sort of tune into.
Mhm.
So you read, I rode my bike to the library and I got books. And in fact, it is a combination of being learning how to survive in the world as any way I could, because I didn't get into it, but my life with my step parents was abusive and
I'm sorry.
neglectful.
Yeah.
But when I really loved a book, I'd steal it from the library. As I just had to own it.
Right.
That's how much I loved books. So, I did the classics that every girl my age probably. I was Nancy Drew
Right.
and A Wrinkle in Time and Magic Elizabeth. And I can't say I knew who the authors were or really cared at all. I read Little House on the Prairie. I just have so many of them. I kept them.
I think the statute of limitations has passed, so you're safe.
Although when I went back to New Paltz, after my book was published, I went back into my old school, and before the teacher was ready for me, I went into the school library and I told that story. I said, I was a kid here and I loved these books, and if I took one out, I'd come back, I'd return it because I didn't want my name on it because you had that little card. I'd return it. And then I'd go back next time it was library time and I'd like slip it under my books because I didn't want to be caught.
Sure.
I'm very smart, very clever little thief. And I told the librarian
Criminal mastermind.
story. What?
Criminal mastermind for books.
For books, yes. And I told her, and she didn't crack a smile. She was not happy. She didn't think it was cute. She didn't think it was about a little girl who loved books. So yeah.
Now, I'm curious now, just because of the interactions that we've had and the reason why you and I first started talking, what kind of Jewish upbringing did you have? Did you have any at all or no?
No.
No. Okay.
It's so my mom was Jewish, my grandparents were Jewish, but my dad was not. So when my mother died, everything Jewish died with her. And I didn't have any Jewish identity. I pretty much didn't even know I was Jewish. I never would have said I was. We had a Christmas tree, we had Easter. Now, my father wasn't religious. My step-parents weren't religious. But, when you default in this country, you're Christian, right?
Right.
And then that same year that I was sent back to live with my dad, so now I've lost my mom who died. I can't remember her. And then my stepmother, who I called mom, she abandoned me. She was gone. Oh. That year, 6th grade, same year, I took out the Jewish star that my grandmother had given me. And I started to become very curious, and not only curious, but I needed to find my own identity, and I needed to find my mother. Like, who had she been? And I started telling kids at school that I was Jewish, even though I had no idea what it meant.
What it was, the concept.
Like nothing. But I went, this shows you what a good little clever mastermind I was. So there were 2 Jewish kids in my class, as there weren't a lot at that time. And I think at some point someone announced, or the teacher said, well, tomorrow's Yom Kippur, so Debbie and Rob won't be in class. And I was like, oh shit, I'm Jewish, I better not be here tomorrow on Yom Kippur, otherwise I'm going to get caught. And so the next day I told my dad I had a stomach ache and I was sick, and I stayed home from school. And I stayed home and I just walked around the house. It's beautiful, right? It was September. And I walked around the house and what are you supposed to do? What is Yom Kippur? What are you supposed to do? Other than stay home from school. So this is before kids got off for
Right.
school. And I just started wanting to know more and wanting to know more.
Amazing.
And by the time I got to college, I could say I was Jewish, and it was, real. I always knew that because my mother was Jewish, I was technically
Right.
Jewish. I'm kind of grateful for that. But I needed to belong to something, and I wanted to belong to something that could never abandon me. My father had, and my stepmother had, and, I lost my sister she eventually came back to live with us, but, and here was something that wanted me, that I belonged to, that was my birthright. And I never let go. I
You kind
latched
of
on.
embraced it back then.
I was teaching Hebrew school before I was teaching Sunday school, little kids,
Right.
before I could pronounce Tu B'Shvat.
Hmm.
Like the holiday came around and I was like, I couldn't even pronounce it. I just jumped right in, head first. And then I think when my kids went to school, we sent them to a day school. And I learned so much from my kids going to day school.
So you had no bat mitzvah of your own?
No what?
No bat mitzvah?
No, I didn't. And I mean, I did when I was 50, like a lot of older women do. But the main part of my bat mitzvah book is that you don't need to have had a bar or bat mitzvah to be Jewish. Like, it's a total misconception. You become a bat mitzvah. You don't have to have a ceremony. You certainly don't have to have a party. You don't need to go to, I mean, Hebrew school teachers hate when I say this. They don't want to hear it, but it's true. And a lot of women of my generation were so happy to read my book because they always thought they were less than. They didn't.
I mean, it sounds like there was so much of you in the truth about my bat mitzvah. So much authority. I mean, even the story with the necklace. I mean,
every little bit, other than I didn't want to write another book with a dead mother. Like, I mean, it would have been easy. Okay, here's this girl. She didn't know she was Jewish. She didn't have a mom, and her father's not Jewish. But I just didn't want to have that. If her mom had died, that it would be a book about a mother whose girl had died. That is, in a middle grade book, that's just not going to be background. So I created a character whose mom, who's Jewish, was just very non-observant, beyond non-observant. She had completely, I'm not Jewish. I don't want anything to do with it. So the same exact thing could happen to my character. She could choose her Judaism. She could seek it out. She could look for it and find it and make that choice. And, truthfully, every Jewish kid has to make that choice. Whether their parents make them have a bar bat mitzvah or make them go to Hebrew school or have Passover seders, at some point in their life, they're going to choose.
Well, I mean, I always got the lecture, I guess, not really a lecture, but from my parents about don't be the link in that breaks the chain, always, passing on down traditions.
I think I put that, I love that expression.
Yeah.
I love it, but if you had chosen not to,
Right.
you would have, and a lot of kids do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
it's
so
something. Sorry.
Well, when I teach Hebrew school, I talk about that a lot. I think what I want to do when I teach Hebrew school is instill in these kids the richness and beauty and the heritage that they've inherited. And I know they're going to make their own choice one day, but if I can be part of making that choice Judaism and make it positive, I feel like I've done something.
Well, on the subject of bar and bat mitzvahs there. So, like I said at the beginning, you were nice enough to immediately agree to be part of the anthology, of B'nai Mitzvah stories. So your response when I asked you, I don't know if you remember, it has always stuck with me. Your response more than any of the other people I had. You said you'd be disappointed if I hadn't asked.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah. So why did you feel that way?
Well, I want to be identified as
Mhm.
Jewish, and I want to be identified in our community of writers. And I would have, I guess I would have felt horribly left out,
Mhm.
Just like I'm saying how important it is to belong. And I feel like I have something to say about it.
Yes.
I actually feel like I have something kind of unique to say about it,
I would
having
agree.
not grown up Jewish,
Mm.
and choosing it.
Sure.
And choosing it for all the right reasons, not because it was just who I was or what I was taught, but because I really chose it.
Right.
It was available and I chose it.
I want to switch gears for one moment. So I was again from your site, and this one just blew my mind. You were on the varsity basketball team, and you were on the varsity track team. So
That's what you pick. That's what you pick up. Yeah.
yeah, although I was super impressed by that. So I have to ask, what position did you play in basketball, and what did you do in track?
You cannot be impressed that I played basketball at New Paltz High School. You cannot.
I
You
was.
cannot. I don't. New Paltz is a small college town, but we were the townies. But I ran track. I ran the quarter. See, I'll show how old I am now. It's the 400 meter. I ran the quarter mile,
Mhm.
and I ran the mile relay. And so my coach wanted to keep me in shape over the winter, and he suggested I join the basketball team. And it wasn't like to try out. I'm telling you, it's New Paltz. Like anyone, they're lucky they had a roster, and I like to say I played bench, but I got to work out and run. He wanted me to stay running.
That's fantastic. I do love the story. You were also in drama, so it's kind of like a different, I guess, sort of creativity. So was there some road in your life that you would have pursued that instead of writing?
Yeah, probably drama. I mean, but I was really bad at it. And yeah, it's interesting because don't you think like theater and acting are cousins to writing?
It's fascinating because I also took drama in high school. I was really into it, and just writing is another outlet.
And I mean, you can become someone else, but you also have to bring a part
Right.
of yourself. You know what else? It's kind of this arrogant insecurity that you're totally insecure, actors are insecure, writers, oh my God, it's
Sure.
not good, it's terrible. And at the same time, you have this big enough ego to think that what you're writing or what you have to say or you being in front of a camera or on stage is worth other people sitting and watching.
Hmm.
It's like I always see it as this duality of having a very thick skin and a very thin skin, being insecure and little bombastic or something. That's not the right word, but so, and theater is the same, right?
Well, but you won a writing award in high school.
Yes, you're so funny. I can't believe it. Yes, I won $25. Yes, I did.
It's
At
not the
high
amount
school
of the money, but
graduation.
it's the honor of winning the award, though.
I did. I don't know why, actually. That's so interesting. I think when I was writing my bio, I actually have proof of it. So I have proof it really happened. I have the little cutout from the program, the high school program, and it was affirmation. It definitely was
Sure.
affirmation and validation. Although I can't remember. I wrote for the school newspaper. I wrote poems, and it was such a small town. I guess who you identified as became who you were. It was like other kids knew who you were. We knew the soccer kids, we knew the artsy kids, we knew the drama kids. So I guess I was identified as a writer really early on. That's nice.
It is. I do think it is. So let's talk about a little bit about your road to publication. How
Hmm.
did that start? You know, when did you start taking it seriously enough to start pursuing that?
I took it seriously as soon as I graduated college.
Mhm.
And but then, you know, it's hard. You're working and you're trying to live. But when I got married and I had that time and the privilege of staying home because my husband was working and I had two little kids. So you're working,
Yeah.
you know, I was cooking, cleaning, taking care of two little kids. I was also, when my little one was 5, I started teaching nursery school part-time. But as soon as they were napping, this is the truth. I took out whatever time, when as soon as they started napping on a regular basis, I kind of remember that, you know, first they're napping all the time. And then there was like, you knew there'd be 2 hours in the morning and 2
Right.
hours in the afternoon. I started writing and I had a little typewriter and then I got a word processor and I started sending my work to literary magazines. No, I'll tell you what I did. It's embarrassing. It's not, I don't know. I typed them up, printed them out. In those days, you mailed them in a
Sure. Right.
manila
The whole
envelope.
thing. Right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you'll have to tell me how far back you go on this
I was
journey.
there. I also sent out in
You
big,
were,
large envelopes as well. Yes.
and they would come back to your house, self-addressed stamped
Right.
envelope, and you'd see a
Exactly.
whole bunch of them in your mailbox. And I I I started sending them out to the Atlantic, the Paris Review, the New Yorker. Like I don't know what I was thinking. And then I sort of went down a step and I went to Mademoiselle and Red Book and that wasn't working. And then I went down. Gosh, you're making me think of all these things. Wow. And then I went down. I'm not down, you know, a step lower in my expectation. From the Paris Review, I started looking at literary magazines all over the country. You know, there were some Plowshares and the Missouri Review, the Glimmer Train, and I got lots of rejections. Like, so I have them all, and
You
then I
kept them on
got one
everyone.
published. I got one accepted, and now that we're talking, it was a story about a Jewish kid in Israel who is on a bus and sees a bag of oranges left behind, a paper bag, and he freaks out. You know, it's a
Right.
bomb,
Mhm.
and the whole bus has to get off. Everyone, and it turns out to be a bag of oranges that this you know, Arab guy had. And but he ends up being in a neighborhood he doesn't know, and he's in an Arab neighborhood.
Right.
And the whole story was how he is nervous and scared. He's American, by the
Mhm.
way. He's American. He's visiting with his grandmother or something. And the Arab kid, you know, is plays basket. I think they play basketball. He's friendly. He helps him find the neighborhood he's looking for. So it was kind of funny in today's world.
Right.
That was, you know, a long time ago, 1990 something. And that was the first story that was ever published. And then I just kept sending stuff out way before it was ready. And first I sent out adult short stories. I took a lot of classes. I would always suggest you never stop.
Right.
Going to conferences, critique groups. And it was 9 years before I got
9
my
years. Yeah.
first. And I will say, it was the story of my mother's death. You know, my mother, it's about a girl whose mother committed suicide, and she's growing up in New Paltz, New York, and her father works at the college, and
Mhm.
she thinks she won't ever become a woman because she doesn't know what it is to be one. And I just wrote this story that I had always wanted to tell. And I stopped worrying about publishing it. I mean, I wanted to be published, but I didn't look for I didn't force like, oh, there's a gap in this market, you know, or I should write this because I know kids will like this. I just wrote what I wanted to write. I know it sounds corny, but I wrote this story that was really in my heart since 6th grade.
That's the one,
And
the What Every
that's sold.
Girl Except Me Knows. That's that one.
Mhm. And it sold to the first editor who
Really?
read it. But you know, in those days, you could send a story to an editor.
Right.
It probably would have been harder to get an agent at that point.
A lot of people say that it's harder to get the agent than the editor.
Yeah, yeah. What was I'm curious too, how long? So I would say 9 years of sending my work
Yeah,
out.
I think that's close to around the same length that I first started taking seriously published. I got an agent fairly quick in the game. I got it, I think, after a couple of years, and then that story didn't sell, and I sent in the next one. Agent dropped me. So, and
Oh,
so it was one of the things that, being naive, I thought, oh well, I already got an agent, so how is it going to be to get another
how
one?
hard could it be?
and and then it took years before I got another years. So by the time, the same thing, after I got the next one, that sold pretty quickly, but it took, I would say, yeah, it's 8, 7 years before I sold it, and then 9 years before it came out, I guess, because it took a while before it to
Oh,
come out.
wow. Really?
A year and a half, but so around there.
Right, right, right. A year and a half after you get that acceptance.
Right.
I I didn't keep trying to send the same things out. I just
Oh no,
kept
neither
writing.
did I. Yes.
Good. Because you know, a lot of people do that. Like,
I know several people
yes,
who
I
do.
bet you do. I bet you do. It's like, this is my book. I think it's great.
Right.
And, I'm going to keep going until it's published. I don't recommend that. I wrote something else and I wrote something else and I wrote something else and got better. You get
Right.
better.
Well, yes, I don't know if that's the same thing that you did, but my fourth book is the first one that I got published. There were 3 manuscripts sitting, not doing anything, collecting dust, and it was the fourth book that got published.
Yeah. And you just got to keep doing it and keep writing. And yeah, I always suggest to people that
Yeah,
they don't, you know,
well, I remember one editor at one conference I went to, and was exactly right, that the ones that get published are the ones that don't give up. It would just, sounds so simple, but it's true.
it is. There
It's
is perseverance,
Yeah.
and there is also getting out there.
Mhm.
Like I always say, nobody's going to come knocking on your door
Sure.
and ask you for your manuscript. It's not going to happen. So it's sitting down and doing the work. It's
Mhm.
sticking to it and making putting yourself out there.
No, you're 100% right. You have to go put in the work and go to, like you said, conferences, meeting people, and learning. It's always
Yeah,
learning and
and
reading.
learning.
So this,
I divide it in when I'm teaching, I divide it into I say there's this huge number of talented people. They're
right.
just huge. There's so many more talent. There's just so many. And then there's this many that actually sit down and
Yeah.
do the work, right? Sit down for 9 years and write. And then there's this many people that actually go out there and like you said, go to conferences and meet people. And so you've narrowed down this
Right.
to this. And this section I call the chutzpah. You got
Yeah,
to have a little chutzpah.
you do.
You do, you
Yes.
know? So, and sometimes I teach that and I'm like, you know what chutzpah is? And like, no. It's a very hard word to translate. It doesn't really mean pushy. How would
No,
you say, what's chutzpah?
I I think, well, when you start saying it sounds much more negative than I think what it actually is.
Right.
When you're trying to give that connotation to it, the
I know.
pushiness. Yeah,
It's, yeah,
it's kind of
go
like
ahead, come up
gall or
with a
nerve.
word.
Well, yeah, but it's not. I wouldn't use it necessarily. Well, it can be negative too, but it encompasses a lot
It's,
more than that.
yeah, but it's not negative, right? It's a positive thing. And yet when you try to put it into English, you're right. It sounds negative, but it's
Doesn't
not.
necessarily be negative, right? Well, I want to describe that feeling that you had when you first found out that you were going to be published.
I just screamed.
Did you?
Oh God, didn't you? Like,
I think I had a different. Let you finish. With me, it was I found with my father was very sick at the time, so I was happy that he got to know that before. So I think I teared up a lot because I was happy that he got to see that I was going to be published. And he passed away several months later, but at least he got to know that I was going to
Wow.
happen for me.
Yeah, yeah, it's validation. I remember, like you said, it's a year and a half, right?
Yeah.
After you get accepted, but during that year and a half, wherever I was sitting or I was at a school function or watching my son play basketball, I would sit there with this contentment, just this feeling like I did it.
Yeah.
Validation. It was very validating.
Oh, well, speaking of
So I
validating, I
could,
mean, you won several awards after, so
well, after those are
right,
validating too,
sure,
but like after telling your family that
yeah,
this is what you're doing
right.
and you keep failing, so for lack of a better word, you're failing, right? And how long do you keep trying? And people are, I don't know, some people are supportive and some people are like, okay, get a job.
Well, right. Well, that's exactly it. It's you show like your kids, that all those hours, daddy sitting
Yeah.
in front of the computer were for a reason.
And you showed your dad.
Right. Same
That's
thing. So
that's beautiful.
you've done a couple of books now with Dave Polsner. So I'm just curious, how did that collaboration come about?
Oh, you know what? We met because we both had books dealing with 9/11,
Hmm.
and we met at I think David Levithan had a panel. He's such an amazing guy, editor, writer,
Hmm.
he does everything, publisher. And she and I he said, what is your next work in progress? And we both had 9/11 books. So
Oh.
we decided to sort of join forces um, in promoting the books, which isn't something a writer ever wants to do. I've lost my stomach turns the thought of promoting it.
Yeah.
It's so repellent. But that's how we met, and then I think she came up with this idea, and I don't know, we just started writing together, and two of
And
the books we
clicked.
wrote together were
Yeah.
published. And the second one, Consider the Octopus, got picked up by PJ Library
Hmm.
because my character was Jewish.
Right.
So
I
that's how
love PJ. It's a great organization. They've been
oh
very good
yeah.
to me also, but I just, that was the last interview that I posted was with Catriella from PJ Library. Was there. So now I've worked with other writers on project and may again, but for you, I'm curious now, is it easier to work with a partner or without? And what are the pros and cons collaborating with someone?
Well, it's funny because the first book we wrote together was so easy because our characters weren't in the same timeline.
Hmm.
So it's like she could write hers and I could write mine, and they didn't need to line up or anything. My character was a year later.
Oh,
Her
wow. Okay.
character's, story took place. So we swapped back and forth. I would write early in the morning, and she would write at night just because that's who we were. And I'd read hers and then I would write mine. But we didn't have to talk a lot about it. Or I mean, we were collaborating, but it was much smoother. Then the second book was much harder because they start out separately, but they very quickly come together. So you're writing someone else's character,
Hmm.
you have to work together more closely, and it was harder and it took longer.
Did you outline it for both of you first? I mean, just which ones? No, just.
Neither one of us are outliners.
Mhm.
There was one scene where we got we would do Google Docs.
Right.
We always wrote in Google Docs, so we'd read and leave each other comments. And one scene, I mean, it was hard. Like, how do you have dialogue between two characters when one is someone else's character and one is
Right.
yours? At one point we were on Google Docs and we just typed in real time. Like my character would say something and her character would respond. And then my character would say something. And we literally had like this dialogue as our characters. And that became
Oh,
a
it's
scene in
fascinating.
the book.
Now,
And
you've had 15 books published, so not asking favorites, but which ones are more personal to you?
well, like we said in the beginning, they're so based on my life. But you know what else I'll say, because we're talking about, your fourth book was the one that was
Right.
published. I cringe when I read my early work. I
Oh,
never
same.
read my early
Yeah.
work. I cringe. So those two books were so autobiographical, but I just wouldn't be able to bear reading them. You hope you're so much better. And so now personal to me is a little different. And I guess, I'm proudest of my 9/11. It's called 9/10. It's not about 9/11
Right.
at all. And it's about the day before.
Mhm.
And I have four different characters, a Muslim girl, an African-American kid, a Jewish girl, and a white boy from Shanksville. And I had to embody each one of those characters, really fall in love with them and become them. Sometimes I had to do research.
Sure.
And those are very personal. How it was, especially to write the character of the Iranian, the Persian, Muslim character, because I'm Jewish, and I started like, how can I do this?
Right.
There's strife. There's strife. Obviously, we know that today,
Right.
more than ever. But I knew that if I couldn't fall in love with her, if I couldn't totally embody her, like really embody her and love her and understand her love for her religion, I was going to scrap the whole thing. I
Right.
couldn't have written it, and I was probably somewhat already into it. And I started doing my research. I don't know if this kind of goes off the topic, but it's interesting in terms of a Jewish
Yeah.
podcast, I think. I don't know. It's hard to even talk about this today, I
Right.
guess.
No, it is. I
Just,
get it. Yeah.
but I guess just I don't want to stop in the middle. I started doing research on Islam, and I went on YouTube, and there was a video of a teacher teaching the tenets of Islam to little girls. And she had a Middle Eastern accent, and her, head was covered, and she was teaching the girls about modesty and hand washing. And she sounded just like Maura Freda. She sounded just like my son's Hebrew school teacher. And it was so similar, covering your hair,
Right.
modesty in clothing, the hand washing, the prayers before, at different times of the day. Because I was never Orthodox.
Yeah.
But my son's Hebrew school after day school was Orthodox. And in that moment, they're so similar.
Yeah.
They're so similar. They're so similar. And that's when I was able to write that character. I just was able to write Nahid. And so I guess that's very personal to me. And Ruby on the Outside, about a girl whose mom's incarcerated, became very personal to me. Again, a girl without her mother.
Right.
A mother who did a terrible mistake, like my mother committing suicide. Her mistake has affected this little girl her whole life. How does she navigate? How does she reconcile loving someone who did this to her? And I did a lot of research, and I ended up doing a lot of volunteer work and working inside the prisons.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. Wow.
So that book is very personal to me. And
Oh, that's
it was the
fascinating
only
alone right
book-
there. Yeah.
It was the only book I ever had kids read it before it was published for accuracy. I wanted to make sure I mean, that's not entirely true. I had my 9/11 book read by two Iranian friends, so I guess that's not true. And I had my Anything But Typical I sent to a autistic artist that I knew. So I guess it's not true, but I had this book read by a group, a sort of a reading group of kids whose parents were incarcerated, and they told me some things that I actually changed in the book. I listened.
The
In fact,
sensitivity
even
readers, kind
before.
of.
I'm sorry, what?
Sensitivity readers.
Yeah, but you know what? That term just like it's such a new term, and I asked people to read my books not because they were sensitivity readers, but because I knew that was the right thing to do.
Right.
It wasn't some imposed idea. Now they're
Someone
getting
was
paid.
making it, right. Now they do it.
Now they pay people. I just
Right.
It's logic, it's common sense.
Right.
I always
Agreed.
did that. It's just what you do because you want to get it right and you want to be respectful. But I certainly very much a believer in writing outside your lane.
The same.
I don't have a lane. I don't have a lane. I'm a writer.
No,
And
I agree with you. I agree with you on that. And yeah, that's one of the things that I just don't get with publishing. That you can only write this, you can only write that. So
I did a whole TED talk about it.
I know. I saw
Yeah.
that.
And then I got dragged for quite a
I
while on
saw
that
that
one.
as well. So I wasn't bringing that up because of that, because yeah, I thought it's ridiculous. But so I know writing is filled with self-doubt. We've discussed that a little bit. So,
Yes.
you're multi-published, award-winning. What was the moment that sticks out to you that you say, hey, I'm pretty good at this? That, I didn't come.
Hasn't
No,
happened
it
yet.
hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't happened yet. Someday you'll get a little glimmer of it.
Right.
You know when it happens? I'm sure you get it. It happens when you're writing the book, when you're, in the zone and you're flowing. And then as soon as you're done, you're like, oh my God, that's total crap.
Well,
I
yes.
can't do this, and
But
then
it's filled, I think writing is filled with both things like that because, there are times that I feel like, hey, when I'm writing is very good. Then it goes both ways. I can look at someone else's writing and thinking like, wow, I'll never be this good. And then I can look at someone else's published books that do well and say like, how the hell did this get published? So it's,
of course.
so
Yeah,
it's
of
both.
course. I always think if you reach for that highest, like I would call literary fiction is what I read.
Mhm.
And I feel like I want to reach for that.
Right.
So I reach for that and I get here, I'm doing pretty well. But you're right. Sometimes I'll write something and I'll say, whoa, that's not bad. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I am filled with a lot of, I'll tell you, sometimes I'll go do a school visit and I can't believe that they actually read the book. I'm like, really? You really read it? And I almost don't believe them.
Oh, it's the best when kids ask you questions about your book and that they've read it.
It's just surprising to me. It's just
Yeah.
it's always surprising. It's always a gift every time
Well,
to think that someone cared
sure.
enough to read it.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you. It's very heartwarming. It's very flattering, and it's just
It
such a
is.
great feeling that someone not only read it but liked your book. It takes,
Yes,
right.
yes, that helps. That
Right.
helps. Or with someone who took something away really meaningful, or I felt something, or I related to you made me understand what it feels like to be this, or you
Right.
made me, I appreciate my mother so much more, or I didn't know this. Now I understand my brother is autistic and you really, or I get that. I get that a lot. Have you ever looked at your bad reviews on Amazon? I've had
I
some
I
doozies.
try not to. I do try not to. I saw. I mean, the Circus killed me on my second book, so it's
Do you remember anything in particular?
No, just absolutely destroyed me. And so I said, I don't want to read anymore. And I know I was speaking to a couple of other people about the anthology that we did, Kirkus's review on that. I don't know if you saw it or not. Kirkus said that that non-Jews won't find this interesting. And they would not do that to any other group. They would never have said that to any other group, but they felt comfortable enough doing it because it was a Jewish anthology. That's the one
I
that
was
pissed me
horrified.
off. Yes,
I was horrified by that review.
yeah.
I thought I wanted to write to Kirkus. You should read it. Do you have it in front of you?
No, I don't have it in front of me, but it was that's basically the gist of it was that if you're not Jewish, you won't care for this book, won't find it
Oh,
interesting.
it
And like,
tore it apart.
right,
It
and like,
tore it
wow,
apart.
never. If it had been, a book, Black voices, if it had been for Muslim stories, they never would have said that. But
Never,
right,
that was even before all of this started
right,
happening in our country. And I was furious.
yeah.
It wasn't surprised
No, I wasn't
necessarily,
surprised whatsoever. Not at all.
right? But
Yes,
wasn't that like
it was
awful?
disgusting. It was disgusting,
Like
and like you said,
who got away with saying that? And yeah, that was really made me angry, and I just had to put it away. And
so that's why I don't put much stock into it. There are going to be people who say things. Just I write for the people who like it. That's it. Who have my.
your listeners should go find that. They should find that Kirkus review of our anthology, because it's sickening.
We spoke about it in a previous interview when I
Did
had
you?
Debbie Reed Fisher on. We spoke
Right.
about that. So we felt the same way, and I spoke about it with Catriella from PJ as well.
Oh, did you?
Yes, we talked about it a little bit. Yeah, so that's it. I can't bother with with reviews. If I started listening to everyone,
But some
I
of them
get so
are so
depressed.
funny. Some are so
Yes.
funny, like this was so boring. Like some kid. I mean, the professional reviews you care about, but some of those, look, Amazon ones
Yeah.
they crack me up.
Well, I saw now that you're shopping an adult thriller
Mhm.
as well. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm also trying to veer from kid lit a little bit. So what made you decide to do that, to try to veer away from kid lit right now?
Yeah, I think I'm getting too old. I'm old. I'm old. I can assure you, like I could write another middle grade. I'm brewing one. I could never write a YA now.
No, you don't think so?
I am so far from having any understanding of, the language and everything, the technology.
Mhm.
So, you sort of write, I feel old enough now to be able to write about adults.
Is that what you think you're going to focus on more in the future?
Well, I have another middle grade coming out, a sci-fi
Oh, good.
that I wrote with Wendy Mass.
Okay.
We go way back, she and I, all the way back to our first published novels at Little Brown with the same editor. So, so that's coming out, I don't know, like a year and a half after it was bought,
Right.
right? Whatever that is. And it was just bought. But yeah, I'm finding it, again, I just feel like I'm old enough. Like when I was in my 30s, middle school was about my intellectual level, not intellectual, my emotional, I guess
Right.
emotional level. And now I feel older. And
Is there one that you enjoy more than the other?
I always wrote my middle grade novels are I think they call them literary fiction, because character, language are more important than the plot. It's usually the writing. So I always enjoy finding the right words or playing with structure. So I just enjoy writing. But now I think I'm diving deep into more complex emotions, more complex structure, more ability to sort of linger.
Mhm.
Kids' book has to move a little faster.
Right.
But I can tell you that my training as a middle grade YA writer is the best training ever to write an adult book. I would recommend it to anyone who wants to be a writer. You need to learn how to write a sentence. You need to learn that things have to make sense. You have to adhere. You have to think about your your reader.
Mhm.
And a lot of these, new creative writing I taught to in college that want to write adult, and they're 18. They just think they can do whatever, I can be experimental, I can do this, I can write, I can have, and you're reading it and you're like, I have no idea what's happening. And your reader has to know what's happening. Go ahead, be creative, do something experimental. But if I'm totally lost and I'm a good reader, as a literature major, I know what I'm reading. If it's that out there, it's not working.
Yeah.
And having been a writer from middle school, you learn that. You learn that your sentences have to mean something, and your story has to, progress, and all the things. So I know, I guess I progressed.
Oh, on that, what advice would you give to new writers?
I used to always say the same thing. I used to say, write from your heart, tell the story you always want to tell. And I still would give that advice. I think now that I'm older and I'm not as sweet and innocent, I think I would say, take a class, learn how to write, do your work. It's not as easy as it looks. And
No.
and you're going to waste a lot of time like I did. But if you take a class, learn those rules before you try to break them. There's certain things, the beginning, middle, and end, and set up, rising action, climax, conclusion, having your character need or want something. These rules or these hints or these skills work.
Yeah.
And learn them. Learn them, and you will get better. You'll be a writer. And I also would say people forget that language is a beautiful, remember that you're writing in an art form where language is your paint. Yeah. It's your dance. It's your, it's your picture, and care about the words you're using and the language you're using. You're not just getting your plot down or your character down. Language is writing is the art of language. So I would say, write beautifully, no matter what genre you're writing.
Or entertainingly, yes.
Yeah, but that I think I don't mean beautiful like lyrical, flowery. Yes. I mean, care about the words you're using and really think about the meaning of them. And entertaining. I want to turn the page. I don't care what book it is.
Right.
I want to turn the page.
Well, I've asked others this here, going back for a moment. So I've asked others that I have on. I know how I felt. Did October 7th change you, like, for good or in any way? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, did it make anti-Semitism just, we always knew was there. It's scary as hell. And it's, I mean, it's twofold, right? My heart, the remaining hostages, nobody talks about them ever. And and NPR has disappointed me I can't even put NPR on anymore. I just can't. They're the slant. And so
I won't say it's disappointing because I thought that's pretty much what I expected.
You always did?
And things like this, yes. There's things like PR, New York Times, CNN, all these things are just, it's all, the same thing. They're all basically, I lump them in together.
I mean, I used to say, oh, NPR, I'm going to get, the real news, and they're going to have BBC and the fact that they never, I mean, I'm not exaggerating. They never mentioned the hostages.
And that's one of the things, these are American citizens, but no one cares because Jews.
There's no question. I mean, at first they thought, oh, it's sensationalism. They're looking at these anti-Semitic events because it's news, but it's
Yeah, I posted often that I will never be the same. It's not hyperbole at all. It's just I've changed forever with that.
what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's look,
can't
you have
help
to
but
make your voice heard. That's one of the things you have to, because it's I can't go out there. I say I can't go out there and physically fight every single person. So I use what I can is my voice, and that's
well, I'll
trying.
tell you what I
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Other than I wear my necklace and nobody has any idea what it is.
Mhm.
I someone thought I had like a medical condition and they said, "Oh, are you like?" But that's okay. I wear it for me. I'll tell you what I do
Mhm.
because and this is what I do. I teach Hebrew school
Right.
and I am building the sense of Judaism and pride and love in young kids because
Right.
they're going to grow up. And if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have any more Jews left. So I feel some satisfaction, or I don't know, that's not the right word. Like I'm doing something.
I think that's great though. Everyone needs to do something. I think, and no matter what it is, you are doing something, and that's commendable. And I do agree with you on that. Yeah.
Because yeah, it's where or there's beyond it's right here in New York City, all
Yeah.
over.
That's amazing to me. Is I always said, I grew up in New York, and it's horrendous now. And that's the Jewish city in the country, and it's so inhospitable to Jews.
It's gotten violent.
Yeah,
And
incredible.
yeah, and the
Uh,
college campuses and I have a conspiracy theory, but I think the whole thing was orchestrated and we fell right for it. And
I don't
Jews are,
disagree, and I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think so
it's
much news
real.
has come out that a lot of this has been orchestrated. And look, there's no way things happened October 7th. October 8th, everyone was already in full force. Everything was already out, showing, organized. There's no way unless there was something done ahead of time. So yeah, I don't think it's such a conspiracy theory that you're the way you make it.
And how easy to manipulate anti-Semitism. It's like, all you have to just to turn the dial 1 inch, one
Well,
notch, and you got a whole flame.
well,
Doesn't
it's
take
easy to
much.
hide behind the mask of this is, oh no, we don't hate Jews, we're just Zionists, right? So, and
Well,
then
that's it.
until the
It's not
facade
even,
slips, right? Yeah. So I always put down on Twitter, like, just say Jews because it's less to type than Zionists.
you might,
We know what
right?
that's what you mean anyway. So
It is what
that's
you mean. And
right.
I know
Well,
I'm kind of isolated here in the country, but
well,
yeah, I guess you know what? You must think this. You think of Germany in 1930s,
it's
and they
frightening.
were
It's
saying,
terrifying.
"Oh,
Yeah.
it's just gonna pass." It's like, when do we stop? When do we
Well, unless something is
run? I
done,
don't.
yeah. Well, the problem is, and we're getting is officials are allowing it to happen and turning the other way. So unless something is done, the future looks very terrifying. I want to see what happens in the near future first before I decide anything.
You know what
But
I say to myself? Why would we think we're any different now than 50 years ago, 100 years ago,
yeah,
1,000 years ago? We're not different.
no,
Why would we think we're special? Why do we think now we're this could never happen again? Why do we think that?
I, that's the thing, and you're right. That's exactly it. And my mother always used to tell me, get your passports ready. Just and I always used to, yeah, okay, my whatever. And now is the first time in my life that I'm thinking, yeah,
And where are you going to
maybe.
go?
I mean, Israel. That's the only place that I think I could go.
Except look, if I worry that it'll even be there. I don't.
Look, I mean, yeah, but to me, when I went to Israel, I lived there as a kid for a couple of years, and I went recently, a few years ago. That was the first time I'd been back. I I got a sense. I was glad to see it through an adult lens. I've never felt more like seeing people like me, and just it was such a warm feeling to get that again now, and just Jewish. I don't see that anywhere else.
No, I know it's you belong.
Right.
You're a
That's exactly.
citizen.
Yeah.
You belong. I feel that way in Hebrew. When I'm at Hebrew school, we can talk freely.
Yes. Yes.
We don't have to. We can talk. I think every group has that feeling when they're in a safe, place where people get it. But I feel I understand, and if we weren't so persecuted everywhere all the time since the beginning of time, it wouldn't be so meaningful, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I
Dangerous.
think, well, that's exactly. Well, I want to find, how can people follow you as we're wrapping up? How can people follow you on social media? Where can they look for you?
Well, Twitter's out. Twitter's out. I'm like, that's the cesspool of the world, right? So I have follow me. You can I do a lot of mentor writing. I love helping people who are in the process of writing. So I have a website called Word Onion, WORD Onion, ONION.US.
Okay.
And then just, norabaskin.com. On Instagram, I just post pictures of the books I'm reading. The social media stuff is just,
Yeah, I
you
get
can
it.
email me. Just
It can be
email
very
me.
toxic. I'm going to put the links down.
norabaskin@gmail. What?
I'm going to put the links down when I post the video. I'm going to put the links down to your sites as well.
Yeah, the social media stuff is, I have nothing to say. If I have something to say, I write it in a book. That's, I don't know. It's
Nora, I
scary.
want to thank you so much for coming. Seriously, it meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to me when you agreed to do the anthology. I was saying, I've been a big fan of yours, and really, I was just saying from my perspective, when you agreed, I said like, oh wow, like Nora said yes. That's how I felt sincerely.
Oh, that's so. I mean, I love getting to know you. I mean, you're a friend, and we're
Yes, I feel the same.
like, you come to New York, you come stay here.
Thanks.
Although you must have family. You're going right to Brooklyn.
No, they're not there anyway. Everyone's pretty much fled. Although my daughter's back in New York now. She just took a job there, and so I'm not happy. So
Where is she?
in the city. She's in the city.
In Manhattan?
In Manhattan, yeah.
A girlfriend of mine someone I teach with, teach Hebrew. She's the one that taught me how to say Tu B'Shvat, like
Right.
30 years ago, 35 years ago. She told her daughter she asked her not to wear her Jewish star on, she lives and works in the city. And after that subway incident,
Yeah.
and now that it's summer and like people's, you're wearing not heavy coats, she asked her not to wear it. That's really
terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
She's afraid for her, safety. That's
Well, you and I will talk more, but as for this, I just again thank you, and I just this has been the Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and again, a sincere, very special thanks to Nora Raleigh Baskin, and please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to the Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.